What is the greatest effort? I'll do it myself in history. Juan Pujol Garcia was a Spaniard who created his own counterintelligence operation for the Allies during WW2. Initially, he approached British American intelligence to offer them his services, but both countries rebuffed him. Undeterred, Garcia created a fictional persona as a pro-fascist Spanish official, got himself recruited by the Nazis, who directed him to travel to Britain to recruit agents. Instead, Garcia created a network of fictitious agents, sub-agents, using publicly available information like newspapers, travel brochures. It was at this point that he again contacted Allied intelligence. He was finally recruited. Garcia continued his work throughout the war. For the same operation, he received both the knighthood from the British, the Iron Cross from Nazi Germany. The Nazis never realized that he was a double agent. Nobody ever expects the Spanish in deception. Yes, in the lead up to Overlord he confirmed reports that the Allied attack would come from Dover and wouldn't attack Normandy. Then, at the last moment, he confirmed that the Allies in fact would attack Normandy, but it was too late for the Nazis to act on it. So afterwards the Nazis still trusted him, as they would point to him and say he was the only one who predicted the Normandy invasion. It was technical issues, as always, that meant the data got to us late. In 1947, a guy named Thor Heyerdahl was trying to prove his theory that the Polynesian islands were settled by people from South America, not Asia. Nobody believed him because it was thought that crossing such a large ocean with the technology they had back then was impossible. So he decides to build a boat using only the tools and materials available at the time these migrations took place, and then he sailed that boat across the Pacific Ocean, nearly dying in the process, but ultimately making it to the Polynesian islands. Maurice Hilleman invented over 40 vaccines during his career in the pharmaceutical industry. In 1963, his oldest daughter caught the mumps. He cultured a sample from her, developed a vaccine, and injected it into his younger daughter. That vaccine is still in use and has saved millions of lives. In total, it's estimated that his work has saved 118 million lives globally. Nikola Tesla was tasked with lighting up the World's Fair, but Thomas Edison wouldn't allow him to use any of his patents, so Tesla had to invent a new light bulb that didn't use any of Edison's patents and could still have thousands made in time for the event. Jon Snow, not that one, the father of epidemiology. No one believed him that the cholera outbreak in what is now Soho was because of a contaminated water pump. He broke it. They arrested him for vandalism and held him until the outbreak suddenly ended. Jon Snow's entire life story is a series of effort, I'll do it myself moments. From his mother getting the money to send him to school, to basically the entirety of his work against cholera, because all his life it was always you know nothing. Jon Snow. Otis invented pretty much what we consider the modern elevator. Nobody was convinced it was safe, so he hoisted himself up extremely high and had somebody cut the cable with an axe to prove how confident he was that the elevator was safe regardless of almost worst case scenarios. Perhaps when no one believed Barry Marshall that H. pylori can cause stomach ulcers, so he thought, screw it, I'll test it on myself, and ended up getting the Nobel Prize. The doctor stationed in Antarctica that removed his own appendix. Goddamn. Brian Acton interviewed at Facebook and got turned down. He said F it and built WhatsApp. Several years later, Facebook bought WhatsApp for $19 billion. I downloaded it for free. Cliff Stoll, the cuckoo's egg, noticed weird traffic on his university servers. No one believed him that there was any risk occurring. Ended up uncovering a major hacking attempt to steal missile designs and basically created internet security. I think it was missile designs. It's been a long time. In 1888, Alman Brown Strowger, an undertaker, noticed he was losing a lot of business to the other undertaker in town. He found out that the other undertaker's wife was a telephone operator, and when she intercepted people asking to be connected to Strowger's funeral home, the operator would route the call to her husband's funeral home instead. 3 years later, Strowger patented the automatic teller exchange, a system which allowed telephone users to make calls without the need for human operators, single-handedly destroying an entire workforce. Imagine being so pissed off you don't just get someone fired, but remove their job from existence entirely. James Clerk Maxwell was idolized by Einstein as being the father of modern physics. Not only did he formulate the classical theory of electromagnetic radiation, but just for shits and giggles he calculated exactly what Saturn's rings were made from using pure mathematics. It wasn't until Voyager 1 and 2 passed by and took photos in the early 80s did we get confirmation that Maxwell was right. He then calculated how to take a color photograph in 1855. This was then achieved in 1861 and is recognized as the first ever color photograph. He calculated exactly what Saturn's rings were made from using pure mathematics. It wasn't until Voyager 1 and 2 passed by and took photos in the early 80s did we get confirmation that Maxwell was right. Like, how would you even know where to begin with that? Probably the time Nando Pirado and Roberto Canessa decided they couldn't wait around any longer and legged it for 10 days across the Andes with no warm clothes, climbing gear, or food except some scraps of their dead friend stuffed into a sock. They finally found someone out in the middle of nowhere, Sergio Catalan, who rode horseback all night and then took a bus to get some help. The mountain climbers had come from the wreckage of a crashed plane that everyone had been looking for over 2 months. They needed help for the other survivors who were injured and starving. They saved 14 of their friends. Henry VIII couldn't get his way with the Pope, so he made the Church of England so he could do what he wanted. This man legit made his own damn religion, which millions still follow today, just so he could cheat on his wife. It's gotta be Amo Koivunen. He was a Finnish soldier in the Second World War when the Finns were trying to reclaim land from the Soviets. He got separated from his unit mid-war in the middle of nowhere. He was the one tasked to carry the drugs they held in case of injury or tiredness, one of which was Pervitin, which was literal meth in a tablet form. Instead of just taking 1 or 2, he downed the whole bottle and went on a weeks-long methed up rampage. He got hit by a landmine, evaded Soviet soldiers, caught a bird and ate it raw, all while on skis. He finally made it back to finish lines where on arrival, he weighed only 90 pounds or so and had a heart rate of 200 beats per minute. He ended up living for another 45 years. I effing love it whenever this story gets mentioned. It's so crazy as to be unbelievable, but it's true. A movie needs to be made about this guy. Jonas Salk needed human subjects to test his polio vaccine. That's normally a long process and he wanted to make the vaccine available as quick as possible, so he just experimented on himself. He also didn't patent the polio vaccine, I believe, and he tried to help fight the AIDS epidemic even before he died. A man who was a tractor mechanic company owner made a good chunk of money and bought a Ferrari. He felt that the car wasn't as good as it could be, and it wasn't very comfortable, so he brought his complaints all the way to Enzo Ferrari, the owner of the company. Enzo insulted the man, saying a mere tractor mechanic didn't know how to make a sports car. That sparked a rivalry that lasts to this day. That man was Ferruccio Lamborghini, tractor mechanic, Italian manufacturing magnate. Lamborghini tractors are still produced, although not by the car company. When Julius Caesar decided to just up and effing march into Rome to declare himself the military leader, or how about his Rhine bridges that he built in a few days to cross an army over a river, then went back over and demolished it just because his army could. It's said the Germanic tribes saw his army do this and basically leash themselves. Imagine being some nomadic tribe and an invading force comes to a river, builds an entire bridge, crosses it, shares in your land, and then goes back home and destroys the entire bridge all in less than a week. Not a very old story. Manji, or the mountain man, lived in a very remote village of India whose route to nearby was blocked a mountain, and hence villagers had to climb it every time, and they had to do that daily to get essential supplies. During one of these trips, his wife fell down the mountain. He loved her a lot. He tried first to persuade the gov to do a mountain tunnel project there, but to vain. So he went on alone to break the entire mountain with just an axe. He did that for 10 plus years and finally succeeded. When Nintendo turned down a collab with Sony, then Sony said, "F it, we'll do it ourselves." The rest is history. Donald Knuth is one of the big names in computer science. Back in the 1960s he set out to write the definitive texts on computer programming and analysis of algorithms. The first 3 volumes came out and he started the 4th in the early mid-1970s. He was unhappy with how the newer printing editions were typeset, and so he took a summer to solve that problem. A decade later the 4th volume still had not been completed, but as a consolation prize we got TeX, later extended to the more commonly used LaTeX. Without question the most comprehensive and powerful language for creating documents with heavy technical requirements. It is a strange mix of a markup language like HTML and a compiled language like C. It is completely free and has been for well over 30 years and is probably the most bug-free piece of software I've ever seen. Certainly for its size and scope. There's not much out there of comparable quality. There is literally no mathematics that cannot be properly typeset in text LaTeX. Its default style is instantly recognizable to any working mathematician. It is used across nearly all STEM fields and there are hundreds, if not thousands, of journals that only accept manuscripts written in LaTeX. It wasn't until the early 2000s that drafts of the 4th volume started to appear. Nobody has seemed to mind. During the American Revolution, John Paul Jones sailed over to England to burn down British naval ships. He succeeded of course, and made back safely. After the revolution he was even pardoned by the town that he burned most of the ships in. I'm surprised no one's mentioned Catherine the Great of Russia. She decided her husband was useless, which, granted, he was, and proceeded to set up a military coup to overthrow him. Even with the plan being discovered early, she dressed herself in military garb and marched with her new army, which had just sworn loyalty to her, down to Peter's palace, where he was forced to resign the throne, all without a single drop of bloodshed, at least until Peter turned up dead sometime later under shady circumstances. But honestly, for a military coup it was pretty non-violent. If saying "F it, I'm ruling Russia myself" isn't great, I don't know what is. I mean, it's right there next to her name for a reason. Desmond Doss, single-handedly saved from 50 to 100 men up on Hacksaw Ridge in Okinawa. His company was ordered to retreat when they were attacked by the Japanese, but instead he said nah, stayed up on the ridge alone, unarmed, and dragged as many soldiers as he could to safety without any help. Even when he was shot by a sniper and riddled with shrapnel, he made sure they took another guy down the hillside before him. George Clooney bought his own spy satellite to prove the alleged crimes of an African warlords because nobody else would. The guy who started FedEx wrote a college paper about a nationwide overnight shipping company, and got a C. Started the company anyways. Later, after he started it and it was struggling, he couldn't get a loan and the company was almost bankrupt, and he bet next week's payroll at the casino on roulette and won. Also got a Silver Star in the Vietnam War and now co-owns the Washington Redskins, the latter often viewed as the biggest failure in his life. Hello Major. He liberated an entire village from Nazis by himself. He's one of the handful of super badass soldiers you sometimes hear about from WW2. The dude in the war with wounded fingers. A doctor wouldn't amputate them so he bit them off himself. My great grandpa did the opposite. They were gonna amputate his feet in WW2 and he said nah, so he went AWOL and treated his wounded feet on his own. When he came back with 2 perfectly good feet he basically said, I wanted to keep my feet and I wanted to keep fighting, and as far as I know he didn't get any kind of punishment, even though he was gone for weeks. Clara Lemlich taking the stage at a union meeting in 1909 to declare a general strike after the older male union leaders told the working girls that there really wasn't a point in striking and it would be too hard. Just be patient and deal with it. So 20-year-old Clara interrupts them, climbs up on the stage, and shouts at the crowd that she's tired of just talk, time to strike, and everyone went for it. Instant agreement of the workers.